USS Thresher, a nuclear-powered attack submarine, sank and broke apart during a test dive off Cape Cod. Twisted pieces were later found on the ocean floor.
I imagine a formidable nuclear-powered submarine vanishing into the ocean with no trace.
Really knows why. The Navy doesn't know why. The Navy kind of goes into dither mode initially with the families. Eventually, pretty quickly, people realize there's a big problem.
One of the biggest mysteries in naval history for a long time was the disappearance of the USS Thresher, concealed beneath quiet and unsolved queries.
What we would see would be ripped, torn, and rended wreckage that we largely just don't see at the wreck site. The wreck site photography indicates something slightly less dramatic than an explosion.
The true story is now being revealed thanks to fresh information and findings. Furthermore, the reality is much more sinister and disturbing than most people could ever fathom.
I think the reality is that the ship was lost for much more mundane reasons. Like there was a fire on board, they couldn't extinguish it, and it knocked out power, and then the submarine just sank beyond a depth where it could be saved.
This is the USS Thresher's narrative, and we'll work together to discover what really transpired beneath the seas. The USS Thresher was more than simply any submarine. It was the jewel of the deep. She was constructed as America's response to the Soviet Union's increasing underwater dominance. The Navy presented a ship that would locate and kill enemy submarines before they can ever launch nuclear missiles at American towns, following more than 12 years of design and testing. The Thresher was a significant advancement in submarine technology when it was launched in 1961 at the Portsmouth Naval Shipyard. She was able to glide through the water with remarkable speed and agility, thanks to its teardrop-shaped hull, which was modeled after the experimental USS Albacore, making older World War II submarines appear awkward and slow. Her high heel, because of her design, she could dive to depths of almost 1,300 feet, which is over twice as deep as previous American submarines, where the pressure would crush inferior ships. Her sonar was her most striking feature. Even the slightest propeller hum could be picked up by the enormous BQQ-2 devices installed in her bow, which could identify enemy submarines from a great distance. Additionally, the Thresher has 4 torpedo tubes that could fire the revolutionary Subro missile, conventional torpedoes, or nuclear-tipped warheads. This missile has the ability to shoot to the ocean's surface, fly through the air, and then plunge back into the water to deliver a lethal blow to its target. This type of power became crucial during the Cold War. The threat of nuclear war had already been demonstrated by the Cuban Missile Crisis. Ballistic missile-wielding Soviet submarines stalked the seas, each one capable of destroying an American metropolis. The Navy immediately needed sophisticated hunter-killer submarines like the Thresher. Soviet submarines have more time to approach American coasts with each delay. The Thresher had successfully completed her initial trials by the beginning of 1963. Naval leaders were eager to deploy her because of her outstanding performance. After a 9-month refit at Portsmouth, she had to pass one more round of deep dive tests before that could take place. The submarine would be put to the test during these tests, demonstrating her ability to fight and live at depths where opposing submarines might hide. There were 129 passengers on board. Along with civilian engineers and shipyard workers, the crew consisted of seasoned Navy submariners. These citizens were familiar with every weld and piece of equipment on the ship. Under the crushing pressures of the deep sea, it was their responsibility to ensure that everything operated flawlessly. For many, it was just another test to make sure America's most sophisticated submarine was prepared for battle, and it was considered ordinary duty. However, as the Thresher got ready for her, on April 9, 1963, the last trials began, and no one knew what was going to happen. The ensuing submarine accident would turn out to be the most deadly in American history, and the truth of that day would remain buried for decades, hidden in secrecy and official reports that failed to tell the whole story. Only years later, when one resolute expert refused to accept the Navy's explanation, would the true answers start to emerge. The quiet before the quiet. On the morning of April 10, 1963, the Atlantic Ocean was calm and shining like glass, about 220 miles east of Cape Cod. The sea looked peaceful, but beneath those waters, the USS Thresher was preparing for a dive that would change history forever. On the surface, the submarine rescue ship, USS Skylark, stayed close, its crew watching with concern, as America's most advanced nuclear submarine prepared to go deeper than any vessel in the fleet had ever gone. At 6:30 in the morning, the Thresher contacted the Skylark through an underwater telephone system sailors called Gertrude. The signal was full of static and hard to hear, but the words were still clear enough. The Thresher was descending slowly in tight spirals, pausing every 100 feet to check her systems. Everything seemed normal as she approached the dangerous depths where only a few submarines had ever ventured. The test procedure had been carefully designed to make sure the submarine could handle her maximum depth of about 1,300 meters. At that depth, the water pressure was nearly 600 lbs per square inch, powerful enough to crush a human instantly or tear apart a submarine if something failed. But the Thresher was built with high-strength steel, able, at least on paper, to withstand pressures down to 2,000 IQ. The crew aboard the Skylark listened carefully to each message. Their ship carried special equipment for submarine rescues, but they knew that at such extreme depths, their help would be almost useless. If anything went wrong down there, the Thresher would be completely on her own. For almost 3 hours, everything was routine. Then, at 9:12 in the morning, the Skylark received a message that would echo in Navy history forever. Experiencing minor difficulties. Have a positive up angle, attempting to blow. The words were calm, almost casual, as if the crew were handling nothing more than a simple problem. But 4 long minutes of silence followed. The Skylark called again and again, straining to hear a reply. Finally, at 9:17, another broken message came through the static. Only one word could be heard clearly: 900. Acoustic operators reported hearing the sound of rushing air, as though huge amounts of compressed air were escaping into the sea. Then came complete silence. The Skylark called repeatedly, their voices growing more urgent with every unanswered attempt. They searched the surface and scanned the depths with sonar, but the Thresher had vanished. By that afternoon, 15 Navy ships had joined the search, but nothing was found. The United States had lost not only its most advanced submarine, but also 129 highly trained men, along with a nuclear reactor and nuclear torpedoes now resting somewhere on the ocean floor. What no one realized at that moment was that this was only the beginning of a much deeper mystery. The official story they told was that the search for the USS Thresher became one of the most intense deep-sea operations in naval history. For months, specialized vessels scanned the ocean floor using the most advanced technology available at the time. They followed faint acoustic clues and scattered debris trails across miles of seafloor. The Navy deployed everything from surface ships to the research vessel Misar, which had already proven itself capable of locating wrecks with precision sonar systems. In June of 1964, more than a year after the disaster, searchers finally located Thresher's remains. They lay scattered across the ocean floor at a depth of about 8,400 feet. The once mighty submarine had been torn into 6 major pieces, spread across an area as large as several football fields. The wreckage told a chilling story of catastrophic implosion. Metal twisted and shattered by forces beyond imagination. When the Beiskauf Trieste descended to photograph the wreck, the images revealed the terrible power of the deep. Thresher's hull had been crushed like a discarded aluminum can. The sail had collapsed. The forward sections were crumpled, and debris was scattered in all directions. Yet the reactor compartment remained surprisingly intact, with no signs of radiation leakage that could have triggered an environmental disaster. The Naval Court of Inquiry was tasked with solving the mystery. For months, investigators reviewed every piece of evidence. They interviewed sailors from similar submarines, examined maintenance records, and studied the wreckage photographs in painstaking detail. Their mission was clear: determine what killed 129 men and destroyed America's most advanced submarine. The court's final conclusion appeared straightforward. A saltwater pipe in the engine room had failed, likely at a joint that relied on silver brazing instead of welded connections. These silver-braced joints were known weak points, vulnerable under extreme pressure. According to the official report, when the joint ruptured at test depth, seawater flooded the submarine. The water shorted out the electrical systems and caused an immediate reactor shutdown. Without nuclear power, Thresher could not drive herself back to the surface. The situation grew worse when the emergency ballast blow system failed, possibly because ice had formed inside the high-pressure airlines. With no way to surface and water pouring in, the submarine descended past her collapse depth and was crushed instantly. The court emphasized that this was a cascade of failures. Poor construction practices, weak silver-braced joints, limited crew training, and overconfidence in nuclear submarine systems had all played a role. In the silence of the deep, the USS Thresher still rests, a monument to human ambition and human error. 129 souls lost in the pursuit of progress, entombed in the cold darkness, where the pressure of the ocean meets the weight of history. The ocean meets the weight of history. The tragedy forced the Navy to confront its deepest flaws and gave birth to a revolution in safety. The SubSafe program, ensuring that such a disaster would never happen again. Every submarine built since carries the legacy of Thresher in its steel and in the hearts of those who sail beneath the waves. But for the families, and for the ocean that keeps its secrets well, one question still lingers. What really happened in those final, silent moments before the Thresher was crushed by the sea? Some answers were found, others are still sinking into the dark.